78. Write that number down. Not because it's your life expectancy, because for a surprisingly large number of retirees, it's the exact age their money runs out. Not because they overspent, not because they were reckless, because of a single, quiet risk almost nobody explains before you retire. And once you understand it, you'll never plan your retirement the same way again. You've probably heard the basic advice: save enough, follow the 4% rule, diversify your investments, and all of that is true. But there's a mechanism hiding underneath all of it, one that can quietly unravel even a well-funded retirement. And it has almost nothing to do with how much you saved. It's called sequence of returns risk. And it might be the single most dangerous, least understood threat to your retirement. Here's the reframe. Two people can retire with the exact same amount of money, the exact same withdrawal rate, and the exact same average investment return over 30 years. And one of them can run out of money in their late 70s, while the other dies with millions left over. Same savings, same average return. Wildly different outcomes. How is that possible? Because it's not the average return that determines your outcome, it's the order in which those returns happen. Imagine two retirees, both starting with $1 million, both withdrawing the same amount each year. Retiree A experiences a market crash in year 1 of retirement, followed by years of steady recovery. Retiree B experiences steady growth for the first decade, then a crash later on. Over 30 years, both portfolios might average the exact same annual return. But retiree A, who got hit early, could run out of money entirely. Retiree B, who got hit late, might finish with a substantial portfolio remaining. The math behind this is almost cruelly simple. When you're withdrawing money from a portfolio, a downturn early in retirement forces you to sell more shares to generate the same income, permanently reducing the number of shares left to benefit from the eventual recovery. A downturn late in retirement, after decades of growth, has a much smaller portfolio impact, both because you have fewer years left to weather it, and because the underlying account may have grown large enough to absorb the hit. Wade Pfau, a retirement researcher who has spent much of his career studying exactly this phenomenon, has shown through historical analysis that the specific years surrounding retirement, both just before and just after, matter disproportionately to how long your money lasts. Not because those years are inherently different, because of when they happen relative to your withdrawals. This is why two people with identical savings and identical average returns can have completely different retirements, depending purely on the luck of when they happen to retire. Think about what that means for you. Right now, you don't know what the market will do the year you retire, or the year after, or the year after that. But you do know that if a downturn happens to land in your first 5 to 10 years of retirement, the mathematical impact on how long your money lasts is far larger than the same downturn happening at year 25. Why does almost nobody explain this before people retire? Partly because it's uncomfortable. It means the safety of your retirement depends not just on your own decisions, but on market timing that's completely outside your control. And partly because average return numbers are simply easier to communicate than sequence risk, even though they can be dangerously misleading on their own. Here's the second layer to this problem, and it compounds the first one: longevity. Most people underestimate how long they'll actually live, and that underestimation quietly sabotages retirement planning before it even begins. The Society of Actuaries, which studies mortality data professionally to help pension funds and insurance companies price risk accurately, has found that a healthy 65-year-old today has a meaningfully higher chance of living into their 90s than most people intuitively assume. It's not just about the average life expectancy at 65, which itself continues to creep upward. It's about the tail of that distribution, the meaningful percentage of retirees who live 25, 30, even 35 years past retirement. If you plan your retirement finances around living to 85, but there's a real, non-trivial chance you'll live to 95, you haven't just made a small planning error. You've potentially planned for a retirement that's 10 years too short, precisely during the years when you're least able to return to work or fix the shortfall. Moshe Milevsky, A researcher who has spent decades studying the mathematics of retirement income has described this as planning for the wrong kind of certainty. People want a single number, a specific age to plan around. But retirement isn't a single number. It's a range of probabilities, and the financially dangerous mistake isn't underestimating the average. It's underestimating the tail. Now combine these two forces. Sequence of returns. Risk means the timing of market downturns matters enormously. Longevity risk means you might need your money to last far longer than you assumed. Put them together, and you get the actual mechanism behind why so many retirees run into trouble, specifically in their late 70s, not because that age is special, but because it's often exactly when a bad initial sequence, combined with a longer than expected lifespan, catches up to a withdrawal strategy that looked perfectly reasonable on paper at 65. This is the counterintuitive twist hiding inside conventional retirement advice. You've been taught to think about retirement as an accumulation problem. Save enough, hit your number, and you're set. But the mechanics of running out of money reveal something different. Retirement is actually a risk sequencing and longevity management problem wearing a savings target costume. The real question was never simply how much you've saved. It was always how your money is positioned to survive an unpredictable sequence of market conditions over a potentially uncertain and possibly very long lifespan. Why does this distinction matter so much practically? Because it changes what actually protects you. Research from Fidelity's retirement studies has found that many retirees structure their portfolios in their 60s and 70s, almost identically to how they structured them in their 40s and 50s, simply becoming somewhat more conservative over time, without ever specifically addressing the sequence risk concentrated in those crucial early retirement years. But there are concrete strategies that directly address this specific risk, rather than just generally reducing exposure to stocks. One approach involves holding a cash or short-term bond buffer, sometimes covering 1 to 3 years of expenses, specifically so that during a market downturn, you can draw from that buffer instead of selling depressed stock investments. This doesn't eliminate sequence risk. It buys you time, letting a downturn pass without forcing permanent, locked-in losses through withdrawals at the worst possible moment. Another approach involves adjusting your withdrawal rate dynamically based on market performance, rather than withdrawing a fixed amount regardless of conditions. If markets perform poorly in early retirement, temporarily reducing withdrawals, even slightly, can meaningfully extend how long a portfolio lasts, precisely because it reduces the number of shares you're forced to sell during the worst possible pricing environment. A third approach involves the timing and structure of guaranteed income sources, like delaying Social Security to increase a guaranteed monthly benefit, which reduces how much of your remaining expenses need to come from a market-exposed portfolio during exactly the years when sequence risk is most dangerous. None of these strategies require predicting the market. That's the point. Nobody can predict whether a downturn will hit in year 2 of your retirement or year 22. But you can structure your finances so that whichever sequence actually unfolds, you have tools available to absorb an early shock without permanently damaging your long-term income. Here's the modern mirror in all of this. This isn't really a story about retirees decades from now facing an abstract risk. It's about decisions available to you well before that first day of retirement arrives. If you're still years away from retiring, understanding sequence risk changes how you might think about the final stretch of your working years, specifically the 5 to 10 years right before you plan to retire. Some financial researchers have suggested this window deserves specific attention to reducing portfolio volatility, not because growth stops mattering, but because a market crash landing precisely in that window can do outsized damage to a plan that assumes smoother sailing. If retirement is closer, understanding longevity risk changes how conservatively or aggressively you might want to plan your spending in the early years, potentially preserving more flexibility precisely because you can't be certain whether you're planning for a 20-year retirement or a 35-year one. And if you're already retired, understanding both risks together might change how you respond to a market downturn happening right now, today, rather than waiting to see how it plays out. The instinct in a downturn is often to wait and hope markets recover before you need the money. But sequence risk means the specific years a downturn occurs relative to your withdrawal schedule matter more than most people realize in the moment. This is where a particularly dangerous myth deserves to be addressed directly. Many people assume that because markets have historically recovered over long time horizons, a retirement portfolio will simply work itself out over 30 years, the same way it might have during someone's working years of continuous contributions. But retirement inverts the entire dynamic. During your working years, you're buying shares regularly, which means downturns actually help you, letting you accumulate more shares at lower prices. During retirement, you're selling shares regularly, which means downturns hurt you in a fundamentally different, more permanent way because the shares sold during a downturn are gone, unable to participate in the eventual recovery. This single distinction between accumulating and withdrawing is why retirement financial planning genuinely requires a different mental model than the one that served you well for decades of saving and investing. Let's return to that number from the opening, 78. Why does this age show up so often in discussions of retirees running short on money? It's not a magic number. It's roughly what emerges when you combine a retirement that began around 65, an initial decade that happened to include a meaningful market downturn early in that sequence, and a withdrawal rate that was reasonable on paper, but didn't account for how much more damage an early downturn does compared to a later one. Add in even modestly longer than expected longevity, and the math quietly runs out right around that age, not because anything went obviously wrong, but because the sequence and the timeline conspired in a way nobody explained clearly at the outset. The Employee Benefit Research Institute has published analyses showing that a meaningful percentage of retirees deplete their non-housing financial assets well before the end of their actual lifespan, and that the timing of market conditions relative to retirement date is a significant factor in explaining why some retirees fare so differently than others, despite similar starting circumstances. So what does all of this mean for you, specifically, whether you're approaching retirement or already there? It means the years immediately surrounding your retirement date deserve more attention than the decades before or after. Not because those years are more important in some abstract sense, but because they carry outsized mathematical influence over how long your money will last. It means your withdrawal strategy should have built-in flexibility, some mechanism for reducing withdrawals temporarily during market downturns, rather than a single fixed percentage applied rigidly regardless of what's happening in markets. It means understanding that your own lifespan is genuinely uncertain, and that planning for an average expectation, rather than the realistic possibility of living considerably longer, quietly sets up a shortfall that may not become visible until it's very difficult to correct. And it means recognizing that running out of money at 78 isn't a personal failure. It's a predictable, mathematical outcome of an unaddressed risk that almost nobody explains clearly before retirement begins. You've spent decades being told to focus on how much you save. That number matters, but it was never the whole story. The order in which your returns arrive and how long you actually live to withdraw from them matter just as much, sometimes more. The real risk was never simply running out of money. It was never seeing the specific mechanism, sitting quietly in the years right around your retirement date, that determines whether your money lasts 20 years or 40. Now you've seen it. What you do with that understanding, how you structure your withdrawals, how you buffer against an early downturn, how honestly you plan for a longer life than you expect, is entirely up to you. But let's slow down and look more closely at a few of these mechanics, because the surface explanation only tells part of the story. Go back to the two retirees from earlier, the ones with identical million-dollar portfolios and identical average returns over 30 years. Let's actually walk through why the outcomes diverge so dramatically, because the arithmetic is more counterintuitive than it first appears. Say each retiree withdraws $40,000 in year one, adjusting that amount upward each year for inflation, a pattern nearly identical to the traditional 4% rule. Retiree A opens their retirement with 2 rough years, portfolio values dropping by roughly 20% combined, before markets recover and grow steadily for the following 2 decades. Retiree B experiences the mirror image, 2 decades of steady growth first, then that same 20% combined decline much later, closer to their 3rd decade of retirement. Even though the total sequence of returns, averaged across all 30 years, comes out identical for both retirees, Retiree A's early withdrawals during the downturn permanently remove shares from a smaller portfolio, shares that would have otherwise multiplied through the following 2 decades of growth. Retiree B's early withdrawals happen while the portfolio is compounding upward, meaning far fewer shares need to be sold to generate that same $40,000 income, leaving substantially more invested capital working through the recovery years. By year 30, Retiree A may have fully depleted their portfolio. Retiree B may still have a meaningful sum remaining, not because one retiree was smarter, because of when, not whether, the downturn occurred. This is why financial researchers increasingly talk about a retirement risk zone, roughly the 5 years before retirement through the first 5 to 10 years after it. It's not that market performance outside this window doesn't matter. It's that performance inside this window has a mathematically amplified effect on your eventual outcome, simply due to the size of your portfolio and the fact that you're actively withdrawing from it during precisely those years. Let's revisit longevity risk with the same level of detail, because the numbers here are often more surprising than people expect. Actuarial life tables don't just describe an average lifespan. They describe a distribution, a full range of possible outcomes. For a healthy 65-year-old couple, the Society of Actuaries data has shown that there's a meaningfully high probability that at least one member of that couple will live past 90. Plan your joint retirement finances around an assumption that both of you will likely pass by 85, and you may be dramatically underestimating how many years your money actually needs to last. This isn't a reason for panic. It's a reason for honest planning. Moshe Milevsky's research has emphasized that the right question isn't, how long will I live? A question nobody can answer with certainty for themselves individually. The right question is, how do I structure my finances so that they hold up whether I live to 82 or 98? That reframing, from predicting a specific outcome to building resilience across a range of outcomes, is precisely what separates retirement plans that hold up from ones that quietly fail years after the fact. Now let's look more closely at the practical tools that address these risks, because understanding the problem is only useful if it leads somewhere actionable. The cash buffer strategy mentioned earlier deserves a deeper look. The idea isn't to hold years of expenses in cash permanently, sacrificing growth for safety across your entire retirement. It's to hold enough of a buffer specifically to avoid being forced to sell stock investments during a downturn. If markets fall in year 2 of your retirement, drawing from that cash buffer instead of your stock portfolio means those stock investments simply sit through the downturn, untouched, ready to participate fully once markets recover. You then replenish the buffer during subsequent years of stronger market performance, effectively using it as a shock absorber, specifically timed around bad sequences rather than a permanent drag on growth. The dynamic withdrawal strategy works on a related principle, but from a different angle. Rather than a fixed dollar or percentage withdrawal every year regardless of market conditions, some retirement researchers have proposed guardrail approaches where withdrawal rates adjust modestly based on portfolio performance. If a portfolio underperforms significantly in a given year, the following year's withdrawal shrinks slightly. If it overperforms, withdrawals can grow somewhat more generously. This isn't about drastically restricting your lifestyle during a market downturn. It's about avoiding the specific, compounding damage of large fixed withdrawals during exactly the years a portfolio can least afford them. The Social Security delay strategy connects directly back to the sequence risk conversation in a way that isn't always obvious. Every year of delayed claiming, up until age 70, increases your guaranteed monthly benefit by a meaningful, government-backed percentage. That larger guaranteed benefit reduces how much income needs to come from your market-exposed portfolio each year. Less required withdrawal from the portfolio means fewer shares sold during any downturn that happens to occur, directly softening the exact mechanism that damages retiree A's outcome compared to retiree B's. None of these 3 strategies alone eliminates the underlying risk entirely. Together, they form a coordinated defense against a threat that has almost nothing to do with how disciplined a saver you were and almost everything to do with timing you can't control but can meaningfully prepare for. Here's a question worth sitting with directly. If sequence of returns risk and longevity risk are this well understood by researchers, why do so many retirement plans still fail to account for them? Part of the answer is structural. Most conventional retirement guidance historically focused on the accumulation phase, since that's when most financial products, tools, and advice are sold and consumed well before retirement actually begins. The withdrawal phase, where these specific risks live, has received comparatively less popular attention, even as academic research on the subject has grown substantially over the past few decades. Part of the answer is also psychological. Average return numbers feel concrete and reassuring. A phrase like, "The market has returned roughly 7% annually over long periods," feels like solid ground to build a plan on. The idea that the exact sequence of those returns matters as much as, or more than, the average itself is a harder, more uncomfortable concept to sit with, precisely because it introduces genuine uncertainty into a plan that otherwise feels settled. So where does this leave you practically, whether retirement is decades away, a few years off, or already underway? If retirement is still well in the future, this is largely about awareness rather than immediate action. Understanding that the final years before retirement carry outsized importance means you'll be better prepared to make thoughtful decisions about portfolio risk as that window approaches, rather than being caught off guard by a downturn precisely when it would do the most damage. If retirement is approaching within the next 5 to 10 years, this is where the risk zone concept becomes immediately actionable. It may be worth having a specific conversation, whether with a financial professional or through your own research, about how your portfolio is positioned heading into that critical window, and whether a cash buffer or adjusted withdrawal strategy makes sense for your specific situation. If you're already retired, this is about building resilience into decisions you're making right now. That might mean examining whether a cash buffer exists to avoid forced selling during the next downturn, whenever it comes. It might mean revisiting whether a fixed withdrawal approach still makes sense, or whether some flexibility could meaningfully extend how long your money lasts. And it means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable, about the realistic range of how long you might actually need that money to last. The number 78 from the beginning of this video isn't a prediction about you specifically. It's a pattern, a mathematical outcome that emerges when an unlucky sequence meets an underestimated lifespan meets a rigid withdrawal plan that never accounted for either. It shows up often enough in the research to be worth naming directly, precisely because naming it clearly is the first step toward making sure it doesn't become your outcome. You've spent decades being told that the goal is simply to save enough. That number matters, genuinely, but it was never the whole story. The sequence in which your returns arrive and the honest range of how long you might actually live to need that money matter every bit as much, and in many real retirements, they matter more. The real risk was never simply running out of money. It was never seeing, clearly and early enough, the specific mechanism sitting quietly in the years surrounding your retirement date. The mechanism that actually determines whether your money comfortably outlasts you or quietly runs dry at 78. Now you've seen it. What you do with that understanding, how you structure your withdrawals, how you buffer against an early downturn, how honestly you plan for a longer life than you expect, is entirely up to you. If this changed how you think about the years right around your retirement date, there's more where that came from. And if you haven't already, go back and watch our last video, 7 Social Security Secrets the Government Hopes You Never Find Out. It walks through the exact strategies that can add tens of thousands of dollars to your Social Security benefit. Strategies that connect directly to everything we just covered about protecting your money in those critical early retirement years. Every week, this channel breaks down another hidden mechanism behind your money. The ones nobody explains clearly until it's too late to use them. So if you want to actually understand your retirement, instead of just hoping the timing works out in your favor, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. See you in the next one.